I really like cattle. I really like them a lot, as I mentioned earlier. And I have found I've had great success teaching youngsters to appreciate animals, and they come up to me 20 years later saying, I still remember that story, by telling them stories that I know either personally or through personal friends, in the hopes that I can stretch that little circle of compassion to include one more species a day at a time, a month at a time, whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you some cow and some interspecies stories, and Bruce, you'll have to rein me in. I could sit people here for hours telling them cow stories alone, not to mention going on to other species. But so this is not going to be terribly scientific, but it is heartfelt and it is proving a point. And your job is to take these stories and and come up with your own experiences and make sure everyone you speak with understands that there is more going on behind those faces that we can't understand, which is our lack, not their lack, than we may suspect. So the first story I want to tell is about our old little tiny farm sanctuary in upstate New York. At the time that I had 4 children, all within a 5.5-year span, some more intentionally than others, so forget all the biology I learned in vet school. Every year we would get a big, huge, fluffy pile of shavings that would last us the year to bed the big run-in shed where all my animals live. And I have a couple of cows, a couple of goats, a couple of horses, a couple of chickens, etc. But at any rate, so every year this big, huge, fluffy shavings pile would be delivered. And it would be in the barnyard, and then it would be our job to shovel it into the barn under cover so it wouldn't get all wet and frozen during the year. Makes lovely bedding. And so the first people to find out that these shavings had been delivered annually were the goats, because the goats move fastest and are the most curious. So the goats would come in out of the field to see what the ruckus is about, and they'd go, shit, it's shavings! And all the goats would pile on top of the shavings pile. They'd go all over it. Goats love to reach the highest level, so they're climbing up to the top. They're, king of the castle, butting each other, tossing shavings all over the yard, having a great old time. Finally, they would get off the pile, exhausted, panting, and go off and lie down somewhere. Then the cows come in from the field, because the cows are hearing some ruckus, and the cows move slower, and they don't climb. But the cows would go, shit, it's shavings! And the cows would go piling into the shavings pile, and they'd put their heads in it, and they'd toss the shavings over their shoulder and kick it all up with all 4 feet, and they would just be having a great old time, very dramatic, very playful, and then they would finally be worn out, and they would go and lie down somewhere. And then the school bus would come and stop at 3:15, and my 4 children would get off the school bus, and they'd go, damn, it's shavings! And they would go racing into the shavings pile, and they'd spend half an hour climbing up to the top, playing the same games that the goats and the cows were playing, getting filthy, having a wonderful time. And it always struck me as a mother and a veterinarian and a lover of my wonderful people that live in my farmyard, that there was not a speck of difference between these mammals except for the packaging. There really wasn't. They both were frivolous, they were delighted, they all had a wonderful time, and I really could not pick out one being as being different from another in the way they reacted to this huge entertainment pile. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 has to do, it's a little sadder. It's about a cow I had named Bridget, a beautiful brown Swiss, and a little goat I had who was a pygmy goat named Parsley. So Bridget and Parsley. And Parsley the goat was always the first one at the door for the evening feeding when I'd come home from work and I'd go out in the dark, and she was always the first one there waiting for her food. So one day when Parsley was an old lady, I went out and I opened up the barn door and there was no Parsley. Everyone else was waiting, and I said, uh-oh, this cannot be good. She'd never not been there first. And I couldn't find her, it was the dark. And I also noticed suddenly that Bridget wasn't there, this big, huge brown Swiss cow. And so I kept looking in the dark, couldn't find them anywhere, and finally I heard this very low, throbbing moo from off in a corner somewhere, and I followed the sound of the voice, and it was Bridget standing over Parsley's dead body. And she stood there, and I, of course, burst into tears, characteristically. I'll try not to do it today. Burst into tears, and I bemoaned, and I was so sad, but thankful in a way that Parsley had died naturally, and I didn't have to make the decision again to euthanize someone. So I picked up her body and I took her away, and the long story short is that for the next 2 nights, I would go out there to feed everybody and Bridget would not be there. And I would look for Bridget, and I would hear Bridget from way off in the corner going, moo, and I would follow the sound of the moo, and she was standing right where she had last seen Parsley. So, we'd kind of put our arms around each other, we'd tell Parsley stories, we'd commiserate, we'd kind of, celebrate the fact that we had this wonderful friend together. But here's my lack of sentience. Bridget clearly felt passionate about Parsley, enough to miss supper for 3 nights in a row because of her grief. I never noticed they were close. I, who think I'm so intelligent, got rid of the read the bad word, thought I was so intelligent, never noticed, as much as I noticed my animals, as much as I try to be involved in their lives, I never noticed that they had a particular bond, and yet they did. So who's the stupid one there? Certainly not the cow and the goat. It was me, the lack of observing human, who figures she kind of has her finger on the pulse of the barnyard critters, but clearly did not know. And that bonding, that friendship, was very deep to them. So I have 5 more minutes to gallop through a next story. The next story, this actually I wrote up for someone a couple of years ago, and I found it's all over the internet, so maybe some of you have heard it. I call it my dairy cow mystery, and this is back when I was in Cortland County, middle of New York State, as a dairy veterinarian. When I got out of veterinary school at Cornell, I wanted to work with cows. My husband wanted to stay in that area, and the only job available was with a dairy practice. Well, I loved cows, and I figured I could kind of turn a blind eye to the fact that every bull calf I delivered in a delivery was going to go off to veal, which didn't last. I mean, I could not be there anymore. But for a time, I could manage it. But at any rate, I get a call from a farmer one day who says, "Doc, I got a mystery here." And this is back in the days when cows were allowed to go out on pasture after each morning milking, and same thing every evening. And wise farmer that he was, he permitted them to calve out in the wilds, in the pastures, rather than being in some confined stall with lots more bacteria and a lot more stress. So at any rate, this was a brown Swiss cow he told me about, who had had 4 previous lactations, which translates as 4 previous babies. And of course, each time she brought a calf back to the farmer after her calving out at the night naturally on the pasture, within milliseconds, the calf was taken away from her, right? That's what happens in dairy production. The milk is not going to be going to feed the damn baby, it's going to feed the damn humans. So at any rate, so this cow had come down with her baby. The baby was healthy, she was healthy. The calf is immediately taken away from her, this being her 5th calf, and she's put into the milking herd. But she had 0 milk in her udder. Now, so those of you who heard me speak earlier know that cows at production just after calving can produce as much as 100 pounds, i.e. 12 plus gallons a day. Empty udder. Where the hell was the milk? She's healthy. The baby's healthy. I don't see anything wrong. And I said, I'm absolutely clueless. I can't help you with this one. So fast forward on that. This is on day 1, let's say, after her calving. On day 5, I get another call from the same farmer saying, "Doc, what the hell's wrong with this cow? Still have no milk." So thank you. So I went and checked her out again, and again, she was glowing with health. I didn't bother to check the baby at this point because they hadn't been together. I could find nothing wrong. Everything was peachy dandy, and she was chewing her cud and eating, but no milk in the bag. And so finally, on day 11 after her calving, the farmer called me and he said, "Doc, I got the answer to the mystery here." Turned out this cow this time had delivered twins. Now, for those of you old enough to think Sophie's Choice, this is where I'm going with that story, think what this cow did. She had a memory of what had happened with her previous 4 babies, gone and never seen again. She had a memory of the pain of that. She formulated a plan, and she executed that plan. And that plan was she had one calf in the woods at the edge of her pasture, as ruminants do, deer, any of those kind of grazing ruminants who hide the baby, go off and forage for themselves and come back, and the babies are told to stay absolutely still. So she had one of her babies in the woods, and she took the other baby down to the farmer and kissed it goodbye. That was it. And that's why she had no milk in her udder. Every morning after morning milking, she went out and she sat with her baby and nursed her baby all day long and loved her baby. And every evening she'd come in with the empty udder. And at night after evening milking, she'd go back out to the field and spend the whole night with her baby. So in a rare estrogen moment for me, I said, "Oh gosh, she's been so smart. Can't you let her keep this one?" And of course the farmer said, "Doc, I love you to pieces, but that's a pile of shit." So the bull calf went down and was off to veal crates and will live the rest of his short life in misery and agony. But I want you all to remember that story and to tell people that story, because I know humans who would not be smart enough to think of that in a sense. And this again shows memory, loss, sorrow, passion, and the ability to make a plan and stick to it. And again, when we look at these animal faces that don't have our facial gestures, because we evolved to be very bright and expressive, and our eyebrows go up and our cheeks go down or whatever when we are expressing emotions. Other animals are not that way, but that doesn't mean they don't feel the emotions. It means that they express them differently, and there may have been an evolutionary reason not to be so beating of the breast and sackcloth and ashes if you're trying to survive. But that does not mean that the emotions are not there. So please, whatever stories you have in your own life of animals that you've experienced, please share them with others. That may be the way that you finally break through to someone who's on the edge of thinking that maybe there's more going on in those animals that they thought there was, but they just need your help to get there. Thank you very much.